this afternoon, as highlighted by Wing Commander Abioye, for this press conference that is aimed at giving us some highlights of the preliminary investigation carried out by the Nigerian Air Force following the unfortunate death of our dearly beloved flying officer Tolulope Arotile. Before we go into the press briefing proper, I believe as a mark of respect to the soul of the departed late young officer, we should rise for a minute of silence in her honor. May her gentle soul rest in perfect peace. Let's have our seats, please. On the 14th of July, 2020, at about 10:55 a.m., late Flying Officer Arotile received a phone call from her colleague, Flying Officer Perry Karimo, a fellow helicopter pilot from the 405 Helicopter Combat Training Group, who wanted to discuss arrangements for their return to Enugu, requesting that she comes to the base so that they could work out the modalities. Subsequently, at about 10:55 a.m., the late Arotile placed the call through to Squadron Leader Diepre Batubo, the Group Operations Officer of the 405 Helicopter Combat Training Group, who was in Mina at the time. The call was made to clarify issues regarding her deployment. It must be highlighted that the call from Flying Officer Karimo, as well as the one to Squadron Leader Batubo, both took place before 11 a.m. on that fateful day. This is over 5 hours before the incident which led to her unfortunate, untimely death. Thirdly, Flying Officer Arotile was later conveyed from Sabo to the NAF base, Kaduna, by her sister, Mrs. Adegboye, where the deceased, that is Flying Officer Arotile, dropped her phone for charging in the house of one of the instructor pilots at their quarters. The house belonged to Squadron Leader Alpha Ekele. Her elder sister, after dropping the phones to charge in that house, later dropped her off at the base Mami Market, which is a mini market complex within the Nigerian Air Force base in Kaduna. This was at about 4 p.m., where she proceeded to photocopy and laminate some documents. It was while she was returning from the Mami Market at about 4:30 p.m. that 3 of her former schoolmates at the Air Force Secondary School, now Air Force Comprehensive Secondary School, Kaduna, namely Mr. Nehemiah Adejo, Mr. Ibekele Folorinsho, and Mr. Festus Bayegun, drove past her in a Kia Sorento sports utility vehicle, SUV, with registration number AZ478MKA. Must be highlighted that all 3 of the individuals mentioned went to the Air Force Secondary School, now Air Force Comprehensive School, with the late Flying Officer Arotile, and all 3 hail from Kogi State. It is noteworthy that Mrs. Adejo, Folorinsho, and Bayegun are all civilians who live outside the Nigerian Air Force base, but were on their way to visit one Mrs. Chioma Ugu, the wife of Squadron Leader Chukwuemeka Ugu, who lives at Ekagbo quarters within the base. Upon recognizing their schoolmate, that is Flying Officer Arotile, after passing her, Mr. Adejo, who was driving, reversed his vehicle. So what happened was, she was returning from the Mami market on the same side of the road, facing onward traffic, and they passed her this way. And they realized that this is their former schoolmate. So in an attempt to reverse, to meet up with Arotile, who was walking in the opposite direction, as I mentioned, in the process, the vehicle struck the deceased from the rear, knocking her down with significant force and causing her to hit her head on the pavement. The vehicle then ran over parts of her body as it veered off the road, over the curb and onto the pavement, causing further injuries. Flying Officer Arotile was subsequently rushed to the 461 Nigerian Air Force Hospital, Kaduna, for treatment, while Mr. Folorunsho, one of the occupants of the vehicle, who also happened to be a trauma nurse, an accident and emergency nurse at St. Gerard's Catholic Hospital, Kaduna, administered first aid. Unfortunately, Flying Officer Arotile was confirmed dead by the on-call doctor at the 461 Nigeria Force Hospital at about 4:45 p.m. that same day, 14 July 2020, as a result of the head injuries. So she was pronounced dead upon arrival at the Nigerian Air Force Hospital. The trio of Messrs. Nehemiah Adejo, Ibekele Folorunsho, and Festus Bayegun were immediately detained at the Air Provost Wing, 453 Base Services Group, Kaduna, as investigations began. They were subjected to toxicology tests at the 461 Nigerian Force Hospital. However, no traces of alcohol or psychotropic substances were found in their systems. It was, however, discovered that the driver of the vehicle, Mr. Nehemiah Adejo, did not have a valid driver's license. The preliminary investigation concluded that, firstly, the death of Flying Officer Arotile was caused by blunt force trauma to the head and significant bleeding resulting from being struck by the vehicle. Being a civil case, that's the second point, the matter will subsequently be handed over to the Nigerian police with a view to conducting further investigations and charging the suspects to court in accordance with extant laws. From the foregoing and all of the evidence that has been so far put together, with all of the witnesses that have been interviewed, the evidence that has been on ground, there is no iota of truth in any of these spurious allegations about foul play. There is absolutely nothing of the sort. Suffice it to say that Flying Officer Arotile was a pride to the Nigerian Air Force, in whom the service has invested massively in terms of resources, time, and energy. Consequently, it is ludicrous for anyone to even remotely insinuate malevolent intent on the part of the service, or indeed any member of the service, against one of its most prized assets.